The moment we wear it, our spirits lift. It helps us grow strong in body and in mind. As we wear it, we learn patience and respect. The belt system motivates students to strive harder and continue growing. This uniform shapes movement into grace and turns performance into something thrilling. Now, embraced around the world, Taekwondo shares our culture, philosophy, and values with pride and spirit. Though it may seem simple, this uniform holds your passion and your journey. It belongs to Taekwondo. Wear the extraordinary. Be with Taekwondo.
Hello and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. U.S. President Donald Trump says Washington will eventually recover Iran's stockpile of highly enriched uranium, saying the U.S. will take and destroy it. This comes despite reports that Iran's supreme leader has insisted none of the material can leave the country. Two South Korean activists returned home this morning after being released by Israeli forces that had detained them on 8 vessels bound for the Gaza Strip earlier this week. Starting today, members of Samsung Electronics labor union will vote on a wage agreement after the union agreed to cancel a planned strike following a last-minute deal with management. The tentative deal will pass if a majority of members participate and more than half vote in favor. U.S. President Donald Trump says the U.S. will take and destroy Iran's highly enriched uranium. However, Iran's supreme leader says the material cannot leave the country. Meanwhile, Trump's Secretary of State Marco Rubio says some progress has been made in peace talks, but that obstacles remain. Our Chong starts us off.
The U.S. and Iran remain locked in opposition over control of the Strait of Hormuz and Tehran's nuclear program. Speaking at the White House on Thursday, U.S. President Donald Trump said Iran would not be allowed to keep its stockpile of highly enriched uranium and reaffirmed Washington's belief that it will be used for a nuclear weapon.
No, we get the highly enriched. We will get it. We don't need it. We don't want it. We'll probably destroy it after we get it, but we're not going to let them have it.
Iran, however, insists that its nuclear ambitions are purely for civilian purposes. According to Reuters, Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei has directed officials not to allow the enriched uranium, which is believed to total 440 kilograms, to leave the country. Iranian leadership reportedly believes that surrendering the stockpile would leave the country vulnerable to future U.S. or Israeli attacks. Before departing for a NATO ministerial meeting in Sweden on the same day, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said there had been some progress in talks but called out Iran over its efforts to implement tolls for ships wishing to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. He added that any diplomatic resolution would become impossible if Iran goes ahead with a toll system. Rubio also expressed frustration with European allies who have refused to grant military base access during the conflict.
No one in the world is in favor of a tolling system. It can't happen. It would be unacceptable. It would make a diplomatic deal unfeasible if they were to continue to pursue that. So it's a threat to the world if they were to try to do that. And it's completely illegal.
Although little progress appears to have been made since a fragile ceasefire 6 weeks ago, a diplomatic window is still open. One of the peace talks' central mediators, Pakistan's Army Chief Azim Munir, possibly left for Tehran on Thursday for talks, according to sources from Reuters. U.S. officials indicate that the outcome of Pakistani-led meetings over the coming days will determine the fate of the ceasefire. 정혜림, Arirang News.
Two South Korean activists returned home this morning after being released by Israeli forces following separate interceptions of 8 vessels headed toward the Gaza Strip earlier this week. Kim Ha-hyun had been aboard a ship seized by Israeli forces in waters off Gaza, while Kim Dong-hyun was on another aid vessel intercepted near Cyprus. The two were released on Wednesday and traveled back to South Korea together, arriving at Incheon International Airport at 6:24 a.m. this morning. The release comes as President Lee Jae-myung on Wednesday condemned Israel's seizure of humanitarian aid vessels and accused Israel of violating international law. Russia's President Vladimir Putin was in Beijing this week to meet with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping. And this comes amid reports that Xi may visit North Korea as early as next week. For more on this, we're joined today by Dr. Stephen Norper, President at Asia Dialogue. Dr. Norper, thanks for coming on today.
Thank you.
So Putin met with China's Xi in Beijing this week, but the two sides appear to have failed to reach an agreement on pipeline details. What do you make of the summit?
Well, it really shows the disadvantage that Russia finds itself in relative to China. The relationship is close, and certainly President Putin wanted to show good relations, a bon ami with President Xi, especially 4 days after the visit by President Trump. However, they were able to come to an agreement and to make an announcement regarding what it considered condemnation of U.S. unilateralist policy. It expressed concern about the lack of an arms control agreement. It expressed concern about U.S. intentions by way of a Golden Dome, a nuclear shield, as well as U.S. defenses in space. But in reality, Putin did not get what he really would have hoped for, which is the pipeline, the second that would have gone through Mongolia to China and significantly increased Russian oil exports to China. But China wants to see more specificity in terms of pricing, in terms of contracts and guarantees. So there is some imbalance there, despite the fact that the two leaders agreed on geopolitical issues.
Right, and they also talked about maintaining peace on the Korean Peninsula and said they're against sanctions on North Korea. So what message are they trying to send, and what does this tell us about their relationship with North Korea?
Well, certainly, they've continued to advocate against sanctions. The sanctions regime has weakened as a result of Chinese and Russian cooperation. But we need to remember that right now, the closer relationship is between Russia and North Korea. The DPRK has bolstered its relationship after President Putin met with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un back 2 summers ago. And so as a result, the North Koreans have been supportive of Russia's war in Ukraine, sending troops to Donetsk and also a missile and other technology, hoping for foodstuff, fuel, and Russian technology in turn. China has found itself a bit out in that regard, but China has also been careful to make sure that it's approaching the DPRK again, and certainly this potential visit by Xi and recent visits by the Chinese foreign minister and other senior dignitaries have echoed China's continued interest in making sure that there is, from its perspective, a stable Korean peninsula and its favoritism toward Pyongyang. So there's a carefully managed dance here where Pyongyang, Moscow have the closer ties at the moment.
Right, and like you mentioned, this summit between Putin and Xi comes just days after Trump's visit to Beijing. Does the timing of the meeting have any significance?
No, in the regard that the original Trump visit was supposed to have been in March, and this was long scheduled. However, in actuality, it does, because it allows President Putin and President Xi to celebrate their close relationship. There have been 40 visits by the two in terms of their meetings. President Putin was just in China last September. So for him, he is able to look and emphasize that his relationship with China China is much closer than China's relationship with the U.S. President Trump had not visited in 7 years, and certainly China has an advantage to having both Putin and Trump come in the same week, and it shows Xi's upper hand at the moment. He's in relative strength, whereas Putin is distracted in Ukraine with the war going badly. And of course, Trump is distracted in Iran with the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. So China finds itself in the strongest position of the three. And President Xi was quick to move on that in hosting both leaders. Earlier this year, the EU also sent a number of leaders. So China has been entertaining a number of dignitaries of late on many issues, geosecurity, but also political and economic. And so this reflects Russia's continued resilience with China and at the same time an ability to temper, from Russia's view, the Trump visit.
I see. And Dr. Norper, before I let you go, President Xi is reportedly expected to visit North Korea as early as next week. What do you think that would signify? Because some analysts see this trip as a response to Japan's Prime Minister Takaichi's push for a more assertive security posture. What's your take on this?
Well, certainly, and we've just had a very important meeting this week between President Yi and Prime Minister Takaichi. China may ostensibly use that as the excuse to go to Pyongyang, but remember, China is equally concerned about Russia's relationship with Pyongyang, and so it may see leverage and an ability to look like it is still in maximum influence when it comes to the DPRK. What will be interesting is Kim Jong-un's response, because he would be meeting with Xi again. He has met repeatedly now with Putin and senior Russian officials, and perhaps this is a way and an invitation for him to think about meeting with President Trump, a Kim Jong-un Trump meeting. And from the perspective of the DPRK, that might be a fair balance and allow the DPRK leader a chance to leverage himself on the world stage the way he did on the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II last year in his meeting with Xi and Putin.
Right, we'll have to see how that goes next week. All right, Dr. Norper, thank you so much for coming on today. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
A union vote is underway at Samsung Electronics on a tentative wage agreement that could deliver major pay raises and massive performance bonuses for semiconductor employees. The proposed deal includes a new profit-linked bonus system tied to chip division earnings and could become legally binding if approved by union members by next week. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
A union vote on a tentative wage agreement between Samsung Electronics management and labor begins Friday, with the outcome set to determine whether the deal officially takes legal effect. The company's labor union will launch an electronic vote on Friday at 2 p.m. that will continue through to next Tuesday morning. The agreement will pass if a majority of eligible union members participate and more than half vote in favor. If the proposal is rejected, labor and management will have to resume negotiations. The tentative 2026 wage deal includes a newly created special management performance bonus funded by 10.5% of semiconductor division operating profits, a new housing loan program worth up to 500 million won, or about $332,000, and an average wage increase of 6.2%. Brokerage firms estimate Samsung Electronics could post operating profits of around 300 trillion won this year, equivalent to roughly $200 billion. If that forecast holds, employees in the memory chip division could receive combined bonuses worth up to 600 million won, or about $400,000 this year, including both the new special bonus and existing excess profit incentive pay. The special management bonus will be paid entirely in company stock after taxes. Even employees in non-memory semiconductor businesses, including System LSI and Foundry divisions, expected to remain unprofitable this year, are projected to receive at least 160 million won, or roughly $77,000, through shared profit distribution within the semiconductor division. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
With less than 2 weeks left until the June 3rd local elections, candidates have now officially launched their campaigns. Our political correspondent Moon Hae-ryun takes a closer look at the ruling party strategy in Seoul.
Waves of blue swept through South Korea's capital region on Thursday as the ruling Democratic Party launched its sprint to polling day, the first day of official campaigning for the June 3rd local elections. In Seoul, Democratic Party mayoral candidate Chong launched his campaign on his political home turf in Songdong-gu district as its former district chief, citing zero major safety incidents over 5 consecutive years and its emergence as one of Seoul's most economically vibrant areas. With 13 days of official campaigning now underway, Seoul mayoral candidate Chong is taking his message directly to voters, hitting the streets at some of the city's busiest hubs. Chong called the election a verdict on incumbent Mayor Oh Se-hoon's record, broken housing promises, a stagnating local economy, and a string of major safety incidents, and pledged to expand his success in Songdong-gu district across the entirety of the city to change Seoul.
In a democracy, elections are simple. You keep the people who do their jobs well, and you replace the ones who don't.
Party leadership also rallied behind Gyeonggi-do Province gubernatorial candidate Choo Mi-ae, with Chairman Chung Chong-rae joining her on the trail after starting the day alongside Chung Won-ho. The DP is targeting a sweep in the first nationwide vote since President Lee Jae-myung took office, with the capital region among the most closely watched battlegrounds. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, Seoul mayoral candidate Oh Se-hoon of the main opposition People Power Party focused his first day of campaigning on reconstruction and redevelopment zones, underscoring his housing policy agenda. Our An Sung-jin reports.
Housing for all is one of the central messages from Seoul mayoral candidate Oh Se-hoon from the main opposition People Power Party. The slogan captured Oh's first campaign stop as the incumbent mayor chose Gangbok-gu district as a symbolic starting point of his race. Highlighting his personal ties to the area through his alma mater, he stressed the urgency of reconstruction and redevelopment projects to improve living conditions in older neighborhoods across northern Seoul.
We aim to accelerate redevelopment efforts, including easing height restrictions and recognizing current floor area ratios to provide incentives for stalled projects.
Oh frames the election as a turning point for public policy, particularly on real estate and livelihood issues. Calling himself a protector of Seoul, Oh stresses his responsibility to work and ease the difficulties of people. He argued that rising housing costs have placed a growing burden on ordinary citizens and said the vote would serve as an opportunity to demand policy changes that better reflect economic realities. With election campaigning just beginning, the incumbent mayor is focusing on housing issues and welfare policies to grab swing voters. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
The Korean government froze fuel price ceilings for a 4th consecutive round amid stable oil supplies on Thursday, while extending fuel tax cuts for another 2 months in an effort to ease inflationary pressure. Our Jo Young-eun has the details.
Fuel tax cuts in South Korea will remain as they are through the end of July, as the government moves to ease inflationary pressure and reduce the burden on households. The decision was made during a task force meeting on Thursday.
We will extend the fuel tax cuts, originally set to expire at the end of this month, through the end of July, and make every effort to ease the public's fuel cost burdens.
Under the plan originally set to expire at the end of May, the current 15% cut on gasoline and the 25% reduction on diesel will both be extended. In price terms, the cuts translate to a reduction of 122 won per liter for gasoline, 145 won per liter for diesel. In particular, a larger reduction has been applied to diesel, which is considered essential for industries and logistics. The government first introduced the fuel tax cuts at the current levels on March 27th, following the outbreak of the conflict in the Middle East, up from the previous 7 to 10% range.
Uncertainty surrounding the Middle East conflict continues. Producer prices are rising, upward pressure on consumer inflation is growing. The government will remain highly vigilant, restore market order, and do its utmost to stabilize prices and ease the burden on people's livelihoods.
Meanwhile, the fuel price cap will remain at 1,934 won per liter for retailers, around $1.28, and diesel would stay at 1,923 won. Household kerosene will stay at 1,531 per liter. The government's sixth fuel price cap will take effect at midnight on May 22nd. In addition, the government decided to extend the adjustment cycle from every 2 weeks to 4, considering the continued instability in the Middle East and international oil prices. 조영은, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Choo Ji-hyun, and this is The World Now. U.S. President Donald Trump said the United States will send an additional 5,000 troops to Poland. Trump on Thursday said the reason for the decision was his personal relationship with Poland's newly elected President Karol Nawrocki, whom he said is, quote, proud to endorse. The announcement comes 2 days after Vice President J.D. Vance had said the deployment had been delayed. The U.S. had been expected to scale back its troop presence in Europe following Trump's demands that NATO play a greater role in its own defense. Ebola has been confirmed in the Democratic Republic of Congo's South Kivu province, hundreds of kilometers from the outbreak's epicenter in Ituri. The outbreak has now killed 160 people, with 670 suspected cases. Uganda has suspended flights to Congo as a precaution. In the town of Rampara, police fired warning shots and tear gas after the family of a suspected Ebola victim refused a safe burial and protesters burned down 2 medical treatment tents. 6 patients being treated inside were moved to hospital. Experts say confirmed cases likely represent only the tip of the iceberg. A French appeals court handed down a guilty verdict on Thursday against Air France and Airbus over the worst aviation disaster in French history. In 2009, a flight from Rio de Janeiro to Paris went down in the Atlantic Ocean, killing all 228 people aboard. Investigators found that the crash was due to the pilots stalling the plane while trying to deal with iced-up sensors. The court handed down a fine of $261,000 to each company, widely dismissed as a token penalty given the company's revenues. Both companies announced they would take the case to France's highest court. Chicago's Field Museum opens the Pokemon Fossil Museum on Friday, the first time the Japanese exhibition has been displayed outside Japan. The exhibit compares real ancient fossils with fossil-based Pokemon characters from the video game series. It was developed by Japan's National Museum of Nature and Science and the Pokemon Company. The exhibit runs until April 2027.
Good morning, I'm Lee Ji-hyun with the latest weather updates. After yesterday's gray skies and rain, the sunshine is finally back. Seoul woke up to bright skies this morning, and today's weather will feel much more like early summer again for the western parts of Korea. Meanwhile, most of the East Coast regions remain breezy with highs staying in the mid to upper teens this afternoon. Then the holiday weekend is shaping up to be warm and mostly sunny. Temperatures will climb a little higher each day, and Seoul could hit 30 degrees Celsius by Monday, bringing back full early summer heat to the country. And this afternoon, highs will be going up 5 to 7 degrees Celsius higher than yesterday in many parts of Korea, with Seoul getting up to 26 degrees, Gwangju at 25 degrees degrees Celsius. Daejeon at 26 degrees as well. Daegu topping out at 23 degrees with strong UV rays expected in most parts of Korea during the day. And air quality will be clean nationwide all day today. Then nationwide rain next Tuesday will put the brake on rising heat. Then temperatures will stay near seasonal norms throughout next week.
That's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at noon Korea time. Thanks for watching.
Across borders, surging forward without limits, Korea. Korean culture has moved beyond a passing trend, becoming a force that colors the world. And perhaps its origins trace much further back into our own history. The true roots where this vast chronicle began, where the essence of K-power and the spirit of our people are recorded. In the 17 seconds you casually pass by, thousands of years are breathing within. The moment your gaze lingers, and your curiosity is stirred, the radiant faces of our history begin to awaken. The real stories of these artifacts, stories we never knew. It begins here, now.
Introducing Korean broadcast content that you won't be able to stop watching. For weary modern souls, Dr. Romantic, the quirky genius doctor of Puldam Hospital, prescribes heartwarming tales of humanity. A couple together for 7 years sees their rose-tinted glasses shatter. Can they keep their relationship alive? Discover the raw stories of youth, work, and love. Beyond what social media can show, experience the vibrant Korea through its hidden gems. Mama, the ultimate K-pop festival for global fans. Find your star in a feast of trendy music and electrifying performances. Now, the whole world enjoys it together.
We're here to bring a new type of news show.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Bringing news just for you. It's Friday, May 22nd here in Seoul. I'm Lee Soo-jin, and this is News Generation. Joining us today is Q.
Thank you for having me. Happy Friday.
Thank you for coming in. Also, Fabi's with us.
Happy end of the week.
Happy Friday, and both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. So we're finally at the end of the work week, but this Friday is even more exciting because we have a long weekend ahead of us. But this holiday has a very distinct look and feel across the country. So Kyun, what does Korea look like during Buddha's birthday week?
So first of all, Buddha's birthday is celebrated on May 24th. Because it's on a Sunday this year, the following day, which is Monday, will be a substitute holiday where everyone takes a day off. Yay! In Korean, it's called 부처님 오신 날. And to commemorate this religious day, colorful lotus lanterns are hung across the streets, temples, and the neighborhoods from weeks before to create a colorful and vibrant festive mood. It may look a little unfamiliar to the younger generation, but in Korea, Buddha's birthday is celebrated just as big as Christmas or even perhaps Halloween. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it does really make the whole city feel festive and at the same time surprisingly also peaceful. So for someone experiencing it from abroad, the atmosphere can feel especially unique. So what stood out to you, Fabio, most about celebrating Buddha's birthday here in Korea?
Well, it surprised me that you can definitely tell that it's Buddha's birthday. The whole city is decorated with these beautiful lanterns, which are called yeondeung in Korean. And sometimes when you even go to the temples, let's say, for example, Jogesa Temple, which is in the center of Seoul, you can see these beautiful lantern sculptures, which beautiful drawings. So the whole city is just decorated to celebrate this festivity. And I have to say, it's quite different from what I experienced in Spain. You see, Spain is a pretty Catholic country.
Right.
So the whole cultural context is quite different, and the aesthetic of it all really provides something that I've never seen. So it was very fun for me. And throughout these 3 years, I have been going to temples during this holiday. And I noticed that there's a lot of people, not only tourists, but also people who are devoted and are really, using the whole meaning of this beautiful day.
I actually did go to Jogesa in the beginning of the month, and they already had some of the decorations up, like you mentioned, the lanterns. They had hung it up, so it was really beautiful just to look up and see all those colorful lanterns as well.
I always tell people that this is probably one of the best seasons to visit Korea, because when you go to the temples usually, well, they're already beautiful, but once they are decorated with all of the lanterns and even the sculptures, it just gets, it's fascinating.
Right, there's so much to really see. And it's really one of those holidays that completely changes the atmosphere of the city. It's interesting how a religious holiday can also become such a shared culture experience for everyone in the city. And that's why we're going to talk more about this. But first, let's take a look at the screen. Buddha's birthday, a national holiday in South Korea, is marked by glowing lotus lanterns, temple ceremonies, and colorful street parades. And with this year's celebrations larger than ever and more young people taking part, attention is turning to the religion's growing appeal among the younger generations. Today on News Generation, we take a closer look at Buddhism's resurgence in South Korea and why it is resonating with younger people, and how the centuries-old faith is reinventing itself as a modern cultural trend. Just as we saw in a video, Buddhism is attracting a new generation of young followers in South Korea. So how exactly popular is Buddhism among, I guess, young Koreans these days, Kyun?
So even among young people who aren't Buddhist, a growing number of Gen Zs and millennials in Korea are actually getting into Buddhist-inspired content and culture. Now, earlier this month, a Buddhist expo attracted a staggering 250,000 visitors, and a large portion of them were actually young people. And what's even more surprising is that nearly half of the attendees weren't actually Buddhist. And riding that trend, Buddhist-themed merchandise is also booming. For example, things like prayer bead bracelets, miniature Buddha statues, and even moktak-shaped toys, which is a traditional hollow wooden percussion instrument used in Korean Buddhist ceremonies, meditation, and daily chanting. But these aren't seen as old-fashioned. They're actually being redesigned to match younger generations' aesthetics. Being stylish, minimal, and even surprisingly trendy. Now, even Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse, a novel that's more than a century old, is making a comeback in Korea. According to bookstore rankings from March this year, it actually climbed all the way to number 8 on the bestseller list.
Wow, so that is really a remarkable shift, especially considering many people that are actually going to these temples are not even always practicing Buddhist. And this trend is not limited to Korea, as Buddhism is also drawing interest from young people and travelers overseas. So how are international visitors, I guess, experiencing Buddhism in Korea, Fabio?
I think Korea offers a lot of different opportunities to experience it. First, we need to analyze why there is interest in the first place. So I think there's something about Buddhism, not only the aesthetic, but also the philosophy behind it that really appeals especially to the millennial taste of the early 21st century. We see this in interior design, but also in how, you know, this wellness culture and meditation apps and all of these different variations that are rooted in Buddhism are becoming more and more popular. So I think Westerners really look up to this specific religion with different eyes, not necessarily as believers or holders of the gift of faith, but rather as people who want to experience a different way of thinking. And I think South Korea really offers that perfectly with opportunities like temple stays, where you can just visit a temple, stay there with a monk, have tea with a monk, and even learn temple cuisine. It's also a great way to detox from everyday life and external devices. And I have a lot of friends and family members who have done so, and they have a lot of fun. I haven't tried it myself, but I would love to do it in the future. Plus, if we're mentioning about other opportunities, I always like going to the museums here in Korea. And one of them is the National Museum of Korea. One of the biggest treasures that they have there is inside a very special room that is called 사유의 방. And I really recommend visiting it because you see these statues of Buddha that are so beautiful and you can really feel the essence and the energy. And even when you go to the gift shops in these museums, you have a lot of little items that are inspired in Buddhist culture. And I think that also appeals to that taste that we have been talking about before.
Right, there's so much to consume. Like you said, there's experiences of people that can actually participate in. There's this cute merchandise as well. There's a lot to do. So temple stays offer a unique way to unplug and experience a different pace of life. And as more people discover Buddhism through culture and travel, the religion is finding new ways to connect with modern audiences. So we also wanted to hear directly from our viewers. So we ran a poll on the Ida News YouTube channel asking, what would you like to experience at a Buddhist temple? And here's what the results showed. So according to a poll, nearly half of the respondents, or 49%, said meditation would be their top choice if they visited a Buddhist temple, making it by far the most popular experience. Temple cuisine classes came in second at 25%, followed by tea talks with a monk at 20%. And Buddhist painting drew the least interest among these with just 6%. So So it seems most people are looking for a chance to slow down, clear their minds, and enjoy a more meaningful hands-on experience. And to get a more personal, in-depth perspective on this, we're actually going to talk to a young person who actively enjoys Buddhist experiences. And that conversation will take place right after the break, so don't go anywhere.
NewsGen wants to hear from you. Go to YouTube and search out channel Arirang News. Click Posts and cast your vote in the poll. Make a new type of news with us.
Joining us today is India from the U.S. who has enjoyed Buddhist culture experiences here in Korea. So hello, India. Thank you so much for connecting with us today.
Hello, thank you for having me.
So India, so what Buddhist experience have you had and which of them was your favorite?
So some Buddhist experience I've had was going to a meditation class, was going to see Chong, see the little lanterns, and also doing a temple stay. Now, the temple stay is by far the best one I have done because it's kind of like a last minute plan. And it was pretty interesting to be able to experience that versus not being able to in a way. For the temple stay, my friends and I, we had hiked all the way up to a mountain with our luggage and our baggage, and we got to do a nice little tour, and it was so nice to be able to see all this green and all this, to be surrounded by nature and to be surrounded by peace. And it was kind of refreshing and a change of pace. While we were there, we got to pick our dorms, we got to go see the temple. We weren't able to see where the monks lived, but we were able to see the outside part, and we were able to learn more about like the monks' mindset of how they're trying to practice spiritual cultivation and how they are still people who do mess up, but they are taking the extra mile to become better. We were able to do a couple ceremonies, one in the evening and one at night. And specifically, the one at night was my favorite because I'm a night owl. I love looking at the stars. I love the fact that we were able to calm our minds right before going to bed. And then before we went to bed, the monk had gave us like a white candle, and we were able to like write a wish on the candle. Oh. And I thought that was like a nice little experience to have. So it's one of my favorites.
Wow, India, thanks for sharing that experience. But what first sparked your interest in Buddhism and inspired you to attend these Buddhist events?
What first sparked my interest in Buddhism was when I was little, I saw a TV show of a guy meditating and talking about nirvana. And I was like, that sounds amazing. I should try that too. Not knowing what nirvana is, not knowing what the person is wearing, why they shave their head, why they're meditating. So that was like my first interest into Buddhism. And just from then on, I did not know enough information because I'm reading these like short little pages and short articles about Buddhism or about cultivation, about meditation, and I'm not fully understanding it. So I like to go to events where I actually get to sit down with monks and try to understand what they're telling me, try to follow some spiritual ways that they try to try to follow some ways where they try to silence their minds and focus on the present and the now and doing volunteer work in a way.
Well, I'm so jealous about your experiences, India. Well, you see, India is one of my very good friends here in South Korea, and hopefully we get to do something together related to Buddhism in the future. But I want to know, what Buddhist experience would you like to do next in the future?
Next? One thing I have to do next time is I have to go to the Lantern Festival. I keep missing it because I'm either working or I don't know the dates. So I have to do that next time. And one day, if I get enough money to travel, I would love to go to Tibet or to Thailand and do like a 3-day temple stay there. Now, if I do that, I would definitely have to learn some basic language, but I would love to go there and visit a different type of Buddhism because here in Korea, there's like some mixed with Confucianism, there's some mixed with just cultivation, there's some mixed with nirvana. And like, I would like to see how different it is within different countries. And I think it would be very amazing and an eye-opening experience for me.
Right. We were actually just saying before the show how with your name, you're meant to really explore this religion. So I hope you do get to have more Buddhist-related experiences here in Korea too. So thank you so much for joining us today, India.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
We just spoke with someone who enjoys attending Buddhist events, sharing which experiences she has tried, what first sparked her interest in Buddhism, and what she hopes to experience next. And after hearing that firsthand, it's clear that for many young people, Buddhism offers more than just a religious experience. So why is Buddhism then resonating so strongly with younger generations these days, Kyun?
So compared to some other religions, Buddhism in Korea is often seen as less restrictive and more focused on meditation and self-reflection, which I agree with. For many people, temples feel more like peaceful places to rest and recharge rather than spaces tied to strict religious obligations. That's one reason why many Gen Zs and millennials are drawn to it, living in a fast-moving digital world while also dealing with economic uncertainty and social pressure. Many young people feel mentally exhausted and burnt out. In that environment, Buddhism is much slower, more inward-looking philosophy, which can feel especially comforting and appealing to young people. So as a result, more young Koreans are trying out digital detox practices inspired by temple life, even at home. Now, Buddhist meditation content on platforms like YouTube has also become hugely popular among young audiences.
Right, so that explains why many people see Buddhism as a place to recharge rather than a strict belief system. And this broader appeal is not just unique to Korea, with similar trends also emerging overseas. So why is Buddhism attracting attention from young people than outside of Korea as well?
I think a lot of people are experiencing Buddhism in a more superficial or softer way, and I think it goes with what Kifin just mentioned. You know, it's not necessarily a situation where faith really defines the way that you have to engage with that culture, or at least that is the case in most Western countries, where, as we mentioned before, Buddhism becomes an aesthetic, a way of living, and almost a philosophy. And well, I mean, I have been living in Spain for 20 years. And it was so common to find, for example, Buddha statues in people's homes, in restaurants, in clubs. Sometimes I would wonder why. And I think it's mostly because of the inspiration of the message behind it. So I think we are seeing this in Korea too, where Korean content is really, succeeding abroad in different forms and ways. So for example, among K-dramas, we have Goblin. And amongst movies, we have Exuma, which is Pamyo in Korean. And all of these different forms of content are showing how Koreans experience culturally Buddhism, which, as India mentioned today on the interview, it can be quite different from other countries. And it's also quite interesting to see how different people make their own interpretation about what Buddhism really is. And of course, I think there's also a need for diving deeper and understanding what it really is, rather than just getting a hold onto the aesthetic or the message behind it in a superficial level. But I think it's also important to mention how that is affecting pop culture overall, and how people are a little less pressured to just, take the first step and try to learn more, which is not really the case with a lot of other religions, where you really have to dive deep into it in order to get to know a little bit more.
I think it's a good way to get young people interested in, at least more open to learning about the religion, because we see a lot of young people turning away from religion now. So that connection to both mindfulness and Korean tradition seems to be drawing in more global followers. And to keep up with this growing interest, Buddhism in Korea is evolving in some unexpected ways. So how is Buddhism becoming more, relatable to young people?
So Buddhism traditionally had an old-fashioned and quiet image here in Korea, but recently it's been reinventing itself to appeal to younger generations. One striking example is I Am Solo Temple Edition, a large-scale group matchmaking event organized by the Choge Order of Korean Buddhism, almost like a reality dating show on TV that we see very often in Korea. So far, more than 11,000 people have applied in total, and the most recent event reportedly had a 35-to-1 competition rate, which is pretty tough.
And there are also a lot of successful people that actually met people and
they have actually, and became couples. And another growing trend among young people people is the so-called short-term monastic experience where participants can live like Buddhist monks for anywhere from a few days to an entire month. Many applicants are university students looking to step away from the pressures of hyper-competitive society and just to clear their minds. So for many MZers, Buddhism today isn't just about religion, it's becoming a form of healing, reflection, and emotional escape from everyday stress. And I personally think as well, I grew up going to church thanks to my parents. But I think in terms of religion, it's a choice. It should never be forced upon on someone. But I think with Buddhism, why it's more appealing to the younger people is because it's a bit more peaceful in the sense that if you go to a temple, it's usually in the mountains. You're in nature, it's very quiet, and it's in smaller groups compared to, I guess, churches, where you have so many people in just one kind of big building. You have the priest preaching for a couple of hours, and you have to sing as well, and you have to pray out loud. It's better to pray out loud, apparently. And even in cathedrals, its scale is much bigger. So I think if you go to temples, it's more peaceful, you're in nature, and you have more like time for yourself, and you really have to dig deep into the inner self and to kind of listen to how you actually feel at that moment. So I guess it's more appealing to the young people because like we've been talking about today, we live in such a hyper-competitive society where many young people are stressed out from the everyday lives of studying, competing against each other. So by going to these temples, it's like digital detox pretty much. You leave your phones behind. You dress as a monk, you eat as a monk, and like you might think it's boring, but it's actually not because you actually get so much from just doing nothing. And that's sometimes what we need to meditate. You ask like young people, do you meditate? I don't think many people will say yes. They're like, how do you meditate? You don't have to do anything, but that's so hard for us to do right now because we're always fixed to our phones. We're filled with so much information and media, social media, things like that. So I think I would definitely want to experience temple stay as well because sometimes I feel burnt out and I don't know what to do. And like I think meeting people would be the answer, but it's actually not. You actually get more stressed by meeting people, listening to them, talking to them. So sometimes just not doing anything, being with yourself, just by yourself, with a monk. Because
fully reaching from within.
Yeah, exactly. Monks, what they do is they teach about life, you know. The deepness of life, you know, you don't have to do much, let go. I think that's the most important part of being, I guess, part of that, being the Buddhist part of that religion. It's very different to other religions. So I think, yeah, like talking about, you know, Buddhism today, it really kind of gave me new insights on this religion, and I really want to have a new experience on this as well.
I can actually relate to that because for the longest time, I think experiencing temple stay has been on my bucket list. And it's funny because I actually identify as a Christian, but still, like all the things you mentioned, I feel like it would be such a healing experience and it would be nice. So from temple blind dates to short-term monastic programs, tradition is taking on a fresh new form, and Buddhist organizations are even actually embracing cutting-edge technology now. So how is technology helping making Buddhism even more accessible, Fabio?
Well, you think about Buddhism, and it sounds quite traditional, right? But then cutting-edge technology is being implemented nowadays. So we see, for example, last April, they launched AI Jahyun, which is the first monk chatbot. So quite interesting. It kind of functions like a chatting system functioned by AI that is based on the sermons and teachings of the Venerable Jahyun, which is the president of the Korean Association of Buddhist Studies. So this chatbot responds to you and your own personal concerns as if it was an actual monk.
Wow.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. And then furthermore, last week we had the Lantern Parade or the Lantern Festival. And this was led by Venerable Hyun, a the Korean first android or robot monk, and this was developed by Dongguk University. So I have a friend at Dongguk University who is also part of the team of ambassadors, and when they were doing the parade, they were quite shocked to see the robots in front of them. But apparently it was a very, you know, fun and lighthearted way of expressing such a traditional value and traditional weight, but in a more softer and modern perspective. perspective.
And this went viral all over social. It was like all over my social media feed last week.
I mean, they even have the outfits on. Look at that. So yeah, it's definitely very fun to see how a religion can be so open to exploring itself and doing so with the way that we communicate with each other nowadays. So as Ki-hoon mentioned, Buddhism has this way of reaching from within, which is quite different from our very fast-paced lifestyle that we have nowadays.
Right.
And so technology, in theory, doesn't really match that. However, when you get those both implemented, it really tells a lot about how flexibility inside of your heart really makes out for very nice moments and great opportunities. And I think this is a great opportunity for Buddhism to reach the heart of people all around the world.
For sure. So from glowing lanterns lining the streets to packed temples across the country, Buddha's birthday transforms the atmosphere of Korea each year. The holiday blends spirituality, tradition, and culture in a way that even non-Buddhists can appreciate. And for many visitors, it becomes one of the most memorable times to experience Korea. And that brings us to the end of today's episode of News Generation. But News Gen will be back on Tuesday following the Buddha's birthday substitute holiday at 10:30 a.m. Korea time with more stories and discussions. A big thanks to Kyun.
It's always a pleasure.
And also Fabio.
Thank you so much.
And to our viewers, thank you so much for watching. And hopefully all those lanterns will finally guide you to some enlightenment this weekend. We are News Generation.